Hello, I'm Andrew Tsao. In this episode of Backstory, we're going to see the trailer for Masizakhe, Building Each Other, a feature-length documentary that focuses on the role that a new generation of activists are playing in the shaping of the future of South African society. And with us today are the filmmakers Scott and Angelica Macklin. Angelica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Scott, welcome to Backstory. Let's talk a little bit first about how two filmmakers from Seattle end up in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, in making this film, because that is quite a journey and quite a distance. What was the connection?
Well, I like to talk about it as being a part serendipity and part providence,
okay,
sort of laced in with this sort of conviction for public education. I was part of a team of faculty and staff who went to Port Elizabeth to think about partnerships, educational partnerships,
okay,
connecting the University of Port Elizabeth with township schools. And in the context of that trip, I was with Ed Taylor, and he made this comment: if we're privileged to go into the homes and
yes,
into the schools of folks here, and we're going to build these partnerships, they should be able to go into our homes and our schools. So the thought was, how can we build these partnerships out of reciprocity? So the beginning of this film was not to make a film. It was to make partnerships and to think about how education can actually be more infectious in a global way.
So the film itself looks at the legacy of apartheid, activism, but through the lens of art, poetry, motion graphics, music, dance. How did that vehicle, if you will, come to play a part in the film?
Well, I think a big part of the choice of the aesthetics of the film really came out of the idea that, partly out of the story of it being an educational project and realizing that education doesn't just happen in the classroom. And when Scott was in South Africa, he met up with Thabang Quinch, who's actually one of the co-producers on this project.
Okay.
And he invited Scott to come to a cipher of activists with the spoken word and artist movement. And Scott joined them and actually filmed the cipher. And he came
tell
back.
us what that word cipher is new
So
to
a
me.
cipher is when people get together and do spoken word and sort of get together
we
in a
will see that in the film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
okay,
you see that a lot of the spoken word pieces come out of this sort of community gathering of building each other up through, you know, spoken word and getting your message out there. But when Scott brought that footage back, we had talked about doing a documentary on education and on the teachers and the principals who had been part of the movement in the 80s, the activists who had actually been burning down the schools in protest of apartheid and the regime. And now they're the principals and teachers in the schools, and how do they sort of recreate this new South Africa? And so we had thought about doing a documentary around that, but then when we saw the work that the educators on the street were doing, we thought, well, we could combine this in a really interesting way to sort of show this more holistic vision of education.
So it's gone from a period, a fraught period of violence and struggle, and as you say, tearing down, to a time of building. And it seems like the MCs, if you will, in the film play a key role in that notion of the teacher or the leader and their voices. One thing I have to observe is that the content of the material is very different than the content we might be used to in listening to American rap or hip hop, in that it is so uplifting and positive. Was that something that was surprising to you when you first encountered it?
Well, you know, there's this global idea of socially conscious hip hop that permeates not only what may come out of New York or Atlanta or even Cuba or Honduras, where you find these pockets of activists who are using their voice through hip hop, through spoken word, to basically express, this is what we're going through, this is our identity. And there are some really neat commonalities that go through. And what Thabang was able to do once we started working with him, as we moved beyond this being a film about school, but more a film about learning in context, is he was the drummer who drummed with everyone.
Oh, so he was sort of the connecting tissue.
So he was the connective tissue that brought people together, and then the MCs were really the curators of the story. If you remember, Thabang says, history, in fact, is a weapon.
That was at the very beginning of the film. That's one of the first quotes that just stuck out for me.
And one of the groups in the film, the Ghetto Youth Uprising, was Usiba Namwadi, which means the pad and the pen. And what they talk about is our histories were written for us. Now we're going to write our history through the actions in the present to give hope to the future. So a lot of the lyric and the content in the cipher, spoken word, and hip hop is all about what are we doing now in order to embrace the horrors of the struggle, but not have that define us.
Right.
We are going to define ourselves.
And the cipher, as you say, is a social gathering where people are gathering in a physical space, but just in terms of talking about media, the radio plays a huge role in this film. We will see a lot of information, a lot of talk between DJs and artists about the subject matter, and that seems to me, wow, what a way to connect, as you say, with the street immediately in a place where dispensing that kind of knowledge, dispensing that kind of experience might not be that simple. Let's talk for a minute about the physical experience of production, because not only are you journeying culturally to a place far, far away on the map, you're immersing yourself in a world that is quite distinct and has its own cultural rules and has its own sort of sets of boundaries. How did the both of you navigate that once you got into it?
Well, I think it comes back to this idea of building relationships. And one of the things that is really important to the methodology of filmmaking that Scott and I do is that we really believe in the relationship first. And that was what the process itself of making the film actually became more about how are we convening with people together and talking about these ideas and about the issues that people are facing today in South Africa. You know, South Africa is at a time where people have the ability to envision a different future. There's a lot of development going on and sort of neoliberal projects happening right now, which are kind of taking away from part of the vision of what a lot of the artists have. And so we had a lot of conversations about that. And through thinking about what are the physical spaces and places that people are gathering to talk about this vision, we were able to kind of just go and hang out in those spaces and talk to people, and we had the camera rolling.
I was going to ask,
we
is
didn't
this
really
before
even
the
know.
camera's rolling, or is this, you know,
we always bring the camera with us. Just
but how do you know when it's okay? You know, how do you know when it's okay to start going, hey, do you mind if I get this stuff done? Or do they know when you come in advance that you're looking to capture their lives?
Well, some of them knew we were filmmakers. So we had come there, and mostly the teachers and other educators who we had been interviewing knew us as filmmakers. And then this became kind of an extension. So Tabang, he knew we were filmmakers. In fact, a lot of the idea was like, oh, you should come and film this, or you should come and film this cipher that's happening, or you should film this show, or let's make a show and film it. You know, that was one of the big things we did.
We talk about making stories with and not about people, and the process is one of deep hanging out.
That's what I was wondering. It's a lot of time on the ground building that trust.
Yeah, but where we had met Tabang is I was giving a guest lecture, and Dion Pretorius had a class in sociology, and I was showing a film that I had made with the Hoh River Nation documenting the tribal canoe journeys in the Pacific Northwest. And Tabang raises his hand and he asked me the question, what right do you have to make of a film of a community that's not your community? And it's silence in the room. And there was a legitimate question. So my response was, well, this film was made as a gift. I was asked to make this film, and the film was never intended to go beyond making it for Chief Kalaya and his family. It was only during the potlatch when Chief Kalaya stood up and said, we received this film as a gift. Now we give it and we want other people to see it. And then we raise funds and we're able to get the film in community centers and cultural centers and educational settings. And so Tabang then came up to me and afterwards and said, okay, you want to see what our life is about? Come with me. So take that risk, go with him. This was no idea if I was going to make a film, and that's when I was invited to SWAM, the Spoken Word and Artist Movement, Cipher. You know, and I had my little pocket camera. And so you mind if I film? He said, sure. And then at some point, someone grabbed the camera from me and pushed me in the middle of the cipher. So it was my turn to go.
So that
and I was like, and so it was that type of unfolding of relationship. You got to put yourself there.
You have to make the gateway, and again, the key word is with them, not about, right? Great. Now here's a look at the trailer for Masizakhe, Building Each Other.
We dedicate this song to all those who sacrificed their lives to drink from the fountain of freedom in our motherland.
Someone once said to me, apartheid is dead, but what we're remaining with now is the stinking smell of the corpse of apartheid, the effects and the legacy of apartheid, you know.
As people who are just emerging out of that history of oppression, we are now facing a huge challenge.
The world out there is hungry for an African voice.
At last, we join the rest of progressive humanity. Uhuru, inkululeko, ki 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 ki. Shall we sing and dance, our cup truly overflowing? Why then, am I not overjoyed, frozen my heart? Shall I with you a secret share?
Oh, how I wonder, I ponder, running around my soul, trying to catch these emotions. I stick both my hands into my eyes, trying to stop this dam of tears from bursting, creating an imagery of historical scars inscripted in the most sensitive part of our hearts. Stories about the brutality and the misery I've heard about causes me to mourn internally.
I think we were always like, in the bands that we played before, it was always like a kind of a carbon copy American thing, you know. And when we started this, we just wanted to sing in Afrikaans because that is exactly who we are. There's no other reason behind it. We're not really like pro-Afrikaans or like really. Afrikaans is not really the issue. It is just exactly who we are.
When I say something in Afrikaans, it's almost like we just feel it and understand it, you know. The moment you translate into English, it just loses that like aggression, you know. Like I said, like kan iemand like a god bel, you know. It's got that sort of like tone to it.
Now these are the times. These are the times.
Our strategy now is music. Music, arts, culture, and everything. Introduce them in activities so that at the end of the day they can get knowledge. They can get like their backgrounds, where they come from, what's their history, who are we really, what are we here to do?
I mean, that's what musicians should do now. Write about what they're going through, because now a lot of people are going through the stuff that you're going through, J-Max. And you, same applies. These guys are hip-hop MCs. A lot of people are going through what they're going through, where they stay. So people can identify, they can learn something from that. And that's how we can build a nation.
What you see inside your mind, do you ever listen?
We have so many changes, progressive changes that have happened in the country, but it actually doesn't mean that the struggle doesn't continue. The government have said it, but it's just that the struggle has assumed different forms now. So it's important for artists to understand that art is nothing else but the tool, you know. A society without artists is a dead society. So let us take this time as artists to be responsible, you know, and wage this struggle. Let's build one another. Masizakhe.
We have walked the road of improvement and transformation, but we are not yet there. There is still a long way, you know. We still need to walk this walk.
I'm an African.
How can we shape our future with what we have now?
So the film we just saw, co-written, co-directed, but produced by Angelica Macklin. Let's hear a little bit about the working process of this team, who else was involved, and how you actually go about navigating who does what with a film like this.
Yeah, well, some of those titles, of course, are because they're industry standard, and so we had to sort of put those titles on ourselves.
Okay.
But really, it was a collaborative sort of DIY effort. And we both had cameras on the ground while we were filming. When we got back and we started going through the footage, we would sort of do it based on who had time. Sometimes Scott would get up, you know, in the middle of the night and edit for several hours, and then the next morning I'd come in and edit and see what he did and change all his edits.
We had a notebook where we kept notes.
So you could pass it off one to the other.
And then, I would see that I would put stuff back in that she would take out.
Yeah,
and then
so wait, so you leave it on the notepad, but like at the breakfast table or something, it's not discussed.
We try not to have a conversation, because we still have our children who are involved.
Yeah, so you don't want to sit there
and at some point we're going to publish these notes because there's some really racy comments back and forth because we're struggling for creative control of the project.
Of course.
But I think the project is much stronger because of the collaboration.
Okay.
And we also have to, nuance. She said it was a very DIY effort. I like saying DIWO, do it with others, because we had the community that we were making the film with involved in some of the editorial decisions. And
in what way?
Posting stuff up online, being able to Skype, being able to take portions of the film back to South Africa, creating conversations. In South Africa itself, they had an indaba, which in oral cultures is a court trial. They put the film on trial.
Well, they wanted to interrogate its cultural integrity, right?
And out of that, one of the things that came out was lots of fragments, but too fragmented. And the idea of having the MCs, the DJs, and the radio provide the narrative mark, because we didn't want to have a narrator, because how can you have one voice in South Africa? It's the Rainbow Nation.
Right.
But that idea of having two MCs narrate the film from the perspective of the radio actually came out of that conversation.
Okay.
The conversation,
number 2.
the conversation to do the motion graphics came out of that conversation.
So there were 2 things. One is we had them watch the film and actually MC as if they were doing a show where they were taking these different poems and pieces of music and actually having a live show. And so then we filmed it, and then we put that together as the narration. But we also ran the film through the film festival circuit the year before it was released, and we got a lot of audience feedback also from film festival showings. And then we met Kuni Chang, who's the amazing graphic artist who did all the
the motion graphic work. Yes, fantastic.
So we met him after seeing a piece that he did in Toronto at a film festival there, and we contacted them and we said, we got to get him to do this for our film.
So you're literally putting the film out there unfinished in order to, as you say, get more feedback and a greater sense of buy-in from other artists in order to make the finished product.
And we really believe in this iterative process, and we want this to be a community-centric as much as possible. So it's how do we take in and layer that feedback and continually feed the film. One of the stories I love to tell is because we were both shooting with cameras, and there's the scene during the Ghetto Youth Uprising where they're performing in front of the bus stop, and I'm in the editing, and I'm looking at it, and I'm usually arguing with the editor, don't move the camera. What are you doing? Frame up, focus up. But I'm looking at this stuff going, everywhere where my eye wanted to go, the camera went, and it stayed for as long as I wanted to. I'm going, this stuff is beautiful, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm so good. And then I look and I see myself walking across the screen, and I realize it's her footage. And oh my God, she's so good.
You even forgot who shot what. Because obviously we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. For those of our viewers who don't really know what goes into something like this, can you give me an estimated total hours of footage you got?
I think we have at least 90 hours plus extra. I don't know, somewhere around there.
And there have been other pieces that come out of this. One of it, as we got into the edit process and having this, we had an idea of the story, which was about education. Then hooking up with Tabong, bringing the cultural activist. How do we connect cultural activism and education in a way that gives us an arc? And one of the phrases that we're playing with is, you saw it everywhere on bumper stickers. Education is the greatest cultural weapon we have to change the world, Nelson Mandela. But no one knows when he said that, or if indeed he actually said that. So we first were pursuing who said this, and then as we were talking to teachers and principals, what impact does this quote have on you? And we were talking to the activists, what impact does this quote have on them? And we thought it was a powerful scaffold for questioning. It just didn't fit in the film to make it explicit. So a lot of the answers were put in implicitly based on that notion, but that was a forced thing that we had to let go of.
I'm going to surmise, though, that also looking at the vibrancy and the richness of the young artists in the film, now you two both not introduced, but there you are making a film. Has that spilled over now? Have you spawned a generation that are now picking up cameras over there? Because they're doing everything else. I got to think they're starting to do films as well. Do you have any feedback on that from them?
Well, I don't know if it has anything to do with us really, but there are definitely some filmmakers over there, some emerging filmmakers, and South Africa has a really strong film culture right now. And Nolita, who's in the film, she's actually been doing really well as a filmmaker in Johannesburg now.
Yeah, I see.
So she's been doing some work, and I think, you know, it's interesting because the first time we went there, you know, Facebook wasn't even around yet. And since the social media explosion, now most of the groups that we've worked with actually have their own sites, and they are able to get out their CDs, and they've recorded. In fact, a lot of the film doesn't really make money, of course, but anything that has come in from generating income from the film has actually gone into helping do recordings, and like Shades of Blackness are working on an album right now.
Abantu has dropped his album, Yakim has dropped his album, Shades of Blackness have dropped their album. They've all got blogs and social media channels. And you got to remember, these artists in the Eastern Cape, if you're in the States and you want to make it, you know, they say you got to go to LA or you got to go to New York. Well, in South Africa, you got to go to Cape Town or you got to go to Johannesburg. But these artists in the Eastern Cape, in and around Port Elizabeth, which is now Nelson Mandela Bay, they've made a conscious decision to stay in their communities, to use their art and activism to have an impact in their communities, whether that's after school programs to get the youth to use spoken word and hip hop to learn, or, you know, other modes. And they talk about this in the film, and that's unfolding.
Well, that's what I like to think about people like yourselves in the Seattle film community. I mean, we can go to New York and we can go to LA, but there's just something so genuine and wonderful about having a regional and a local community that has an investment in where they live and the stories that come out of that. So we're pretty much now entering the era, post-apartheid era, and Mandela's impact has been felt. And, you know, we're taping this show at a time where, you know, we're pretty much ready to enter the post-Mandela era. Give us your thoughts now on having done this film and your experience with that, about the future. About the future of that area.
Well, to quote Imhotep or Doomza, the struggle continues. It just takes on different moments. There might have been a political reimagining and this emergence of democracy, but how has the economic and the social impact transformed? And there's still lots of struggles, lots of tensions, and I think it's a real uphill battle. So we look to our, you know, friends, brothers, and sisters there to blaze these trails. So, you know, there's some real doom and gloom scenarios, but there's these pockets of some wonderful hope that gives us hope, I think, even here, to looking some of the contexts we're dealing with.
And that's the idea of building.
Yeah.
So let's finish up by me asking what's next for Scott and Angelica Macklin as filmmakers.
Well, I'm a PhD student now at the University of Washington in the Gender, Women, Sexuality Studies department, and I have been working on a project called Women Who Rock, Making Scenes, Building Communities. And we've just launched a huge archive of oral histories, and I've been working with students to make films around women who are in music scenes, and we've been doing some really, really interesting work around thinking about long-form oral history and then what you can do with those in terms of creating all these spin-off pieces and mini documentaries. And it's kind of this massive archive of footage that we get to play with and also continue building with here in Seattle. Because a lot of what I learned from doing the project Masizakhe is that right here in Seattle there's tons of stuff to be done too. And lots of artists and people doing incredible work. And so I'm just really excited to be a part of that project.
I've probably got about a half dozen smaller, what I call community-centric stories that I'm doing, whether it's with the Seattle Fandango Project or various hip-hop communities in Seattle. But I'm really interested in exploring the space that Snowfall, the interactive HTML5 interface, and there's this new film, or this new property called Hollow that's really amazing, where you can take these fragments and these wonderful stories, but still use the technology as a platform to create an arc. So you still have to employ good storytelling techniques, but you can design to the medium. And we're really seeing what does interactivity mean. So looking to explore some of those modes with some of these stories that we're developing.
Great. Look forward to having you both back. It's been a pleasure. Angelica,
so
Scott, thanks for being here on Backstory. Wonderful. And thank you for watching Backstory. I'm Andrew Tsao, and I will see you again behind the scenes.